Okay, so this one is about the nature of uniqueness. So this one is dedicated to anyone out there who's listening who would consider themselves neurodiverse, and who has had a love-hate relationship with their own uniqueness, and who would consider themselves at, on an extreme end of, what human beings have come to call the spectrum. If you consider yourself neurodiverse, at the end of the day, from my perspective, that's meaningless. It's just a way of human beings that don't understand your nature to figure out why they can't understand you. That's how I see it. So I'm an innovation advisor for the New Zealand government's innovation agency. I work with a lot of what I would call genius minds, people who are extremely gifted and talented in an extreme way, and who are often extremely inept in an equal and opposite way. And such is the nature of a binary reality. Most of us, if we're extremely gifted in one area, then there's something that has to compensate in order to allow that extremity to be what it is. You can't be extremely focused and extremely broad simultaneously. You can't have extreme devotion and understanding of a single topic and go extraordinarily deep on that topic, as well as be extremely broad. So you can't be a specialist and a generalist. I consider myself a specialist generalist in that I can go significantly deep with most people, but I can't go as deep as they can. And so, I can go extremely broad. So when I view the spectrum, the thing I have come to appreciate about my own uniqueness is that I can connect with anyone, anywhere on the spectrum at their level without them having to step themselves up or down to please me or to try and get me to understand. I can just hang there and listen, and with patience, until I understand. And but someone on the spectrum who goes extremely deep. Now, if you look at the spectrum as polarity, and if you look at left and right on that spectrum are the extremes of both. So if you looked at a spectrum of politics, you got left wing, right wing. Left wing is the extreme on the left, right wing is extreme on the right. Non-partisan in the middle, and varying degrees of both. If you look at the spectrum of neurodiversity, some people would consider themselves to resonate at a specific pitch. It's a bandwidth of frequency. So they would look at it and say, I resonate at that pitch in an extremely narrow bandwidth. But the beauty of that is that if I'm solely focused on that bandwidth of energy, I can go extraordinarily deep on that bandwidth. And so a generalist, you zoom out and you look at the entire spectrum and you focus on the entire thing. And so you're capable of understanding the full spectrum, but you can't go as deep as they can go. Not possible. And so for me as a specialist generalist, my intention is to go as deep as possible across the entire spectrum. And so I'm extremely privileged to be able to work with such an incredibly diverse group of people with extraordinary gifts. And one of the challenges is, because this is, of course, this is what you would expect in the innovation ecosystem. Incredibly broad spectrum of gifted individuals whose uniqueness is so glaringly obvious. But in the same way, they are equally devoid of understanding in other areas. And of course, how could you, if you've devoted on a narrow band of reality or of diversity, and you've devoted your life to going as deep as you can and on that single band, then there's an opportunity cost. You've chosen to devote your life to one single thing. And so there is an absence of understanding of the others. So the deeper you can go within a specific field, the more shallow your understanding is outside of that band, you see. And so this is why I say, as a generalist, I'm not honed in on a band. I'm zoomed out like an observer, appreciating the entire spectrum. And so in my job, if you imagine that spectrum, there are individuals representing every band on that spectrum, and they all go profoundly deep. Profoundly deep. And they're all, as deep as they can go, they are challenged in other areas. And so how do you navigate this? How do you navigate this where you've got profound uniqueness across the spectrum, the full gamut of genius? It's plainly obvious. And then if you've come up with something that's totally genius because you've gone further down a rabbit hole than any other human being on earth, in many cases, and the condition upon you being able to utilize that to create an impact in the world, to spark a transformation, to initiate some form of change or innovation in the real world, there are a whole bunch of obstacles that have to be transcended. Now, if you're extreme on the spectrum in terms of that, now the way I look at the spectrum of neurodiversity is, on the left I see binary, so people who view the world in binary, black and white. And on the other end of the spectrum, and so black and white means separation, means determinism, ones and zeros. And then on the other end of the spectrum is a singular perspective. One perspective sees and expresses their nature in a singular way, and the other end of the spectrum sees reality in a separate way. So on the left-hand side, people are playing a zero-sum game. There are winners and losers. And on the right-hand end of the spectrum, it's a singular perspective or an infinite perspective. So unity is the perspective. Now, and both are completely valid. And we want this uniqueness. We want varying degrees of diversity on that spectrum. We want the full gamut. And we don't want to force them to change, because their uniqueness is what makes it so potent. We don't want to tell them that they have to become something else, because in truth, they don't. They don't. In context of collaboration. So I spend a lot of my time trying to connect gifted people with other gifted people who are gifted in the way that they are deficient. Because you see, so if you imagine the full spectrum now, the full gamut, And you imagine for every frequency on that spectrum, there is a gifted individual with a very narrow focus that goes deeper than any other human being on the planet on that single topic. Like the most fine, narrow niche you could imagine. And they go deeper than any other human being on the planet. And so imagine every frequency on that spectrum. And let's say there's a dozen people on that spectrum. And if every frequency is covered, then on that spectrum, it is just an ocean of potency, of pure potential. If every band on that spectrum is accounted for, and there's a human being that goes deeper than any other human being on the planet, then you have pure, infinite potential of those people if they can collaborate, you see. So the full spectrum, pure genius, those individuals, but they're only two-dimensional. Because they only go up and down a column of focus. And so in order for collaboration to happen, there has to be interconnection across those bands. So someone on the extreme of the left and someone on the extreme of the right, in order to activate and realize the latent potential of what they're capable of together, they have to be able to connect. And the reality is that if you take the person on the extreme left, you take the person on the extreme right and remove everyone in between, so there's space in between, then that is a bridge too far. I've experimented with this a lot. And it is a bridge too far. It is impossible. From my experience, I'm not going to say it is totally impossible, but for them to come to understand each other without having to significantly change themselves in order to meet somewhere in between. They're so radically different that the transformation required, if we force them to have to change, one of them's having to step up their perspective and one's having to step down their perspective. Because one sees the world in unity. So that's like an eagle eye view. So if you imagine you're hovering above the earth, looking down on it, you're seeing everything happening in two dimensions. Now, if you take someone on the other end of the spectrum, they are looking at they're looking at reality through their own two eyes. They're seeing separation. They're seeing you and me. The other end of the spectrum just sees one thing, just sees a singularity. They see a singularity expressing its nature in binary. But it's all just one thing. So throughout my life, I've come to zoom in and out of these perspectives, up and down the spectrum, depending on who my audience is. And you'll notice if you've listened to my podcast, if you've listened to multiple episodes, what you'll find is that I accidentally get the tenses wrong, and I accidentally get singular and plural in my language wrong. And it's because I'm in the process of zooming in and out of a singular and a binary perspective all the time. And sometimes I don't catch up. Sometimes my mouth is hanging out in a singular perspective and my mind is still hanging out in a binary perspective. And so that's why that happens. And so that's my uniqueness, is I've exercised that muscle enough, and this isn't like, these aren't gifts. Well, I'm sure we're predisposed to things, right? You know, if we focus on a specific thing, we're more predisposed to that becoming, a tool we can use later in life. And so that's the muscle I've been exercising throughout my life, is to zoom in and out of singular and binary perspective and adapting to my audience based on my understanding of where I perceive them to be on the spectrum, without ever making them feel like they have to change to suit me. That's not how you cherish diversity. That's not how you appreciate uniqueness. You don't appreciate uniqueness by seeing someone that's different and trying to make them feel as though they have to change to make you understand. The challenge in that situation is for you to understand them. And that requires curiosity. It requires questioning and listening. And this is the key to uniqueness. This is the key to allowing someone to be who they are unconditionally without having to change. I don't want someone on the extreme end of the spectrum and someone on the other extreme end of the spectrum. I don't want them to I don't want them to diminish their superpower, to bridge the space in between. I want to create steps. I want to fill the space in between so that their nature can be stepped up and stepped down through people who can act as intermediaries, who can interpret them at their level and step it down in a slightly different way, who can then step it down to someone else, who can step it down to someone else, step it down, and on the other end of the spectrum, someone stepping it up, stepping it up, stepping it up, stepping it up. So people are collaborating, creating bonds like atoms. You know, and when you think about it, it's kind of like if you look at the colors of the rainbow and you look at those bands of color. Imagine one end of the spectrum. What are the colors? I think on one end you've got violet, ultraviolet. On the other end of the spectrum, what is the base color? Can't remember what it is. Let's say it's blue. And then you miss out all the other colors in between. Then if you remove those colors from the color gamut, then the potential of what is visible is disabled. It's incapable. You know, even if you look at the gamut of RGB, red, green, and blue, you look at the possibility of the colors that you can envisage with RGB. Now remove G. Your reality is far less rich. That your reality is diluted. So understand this. You don't want red, green, and blue. You don't want to diminish their capability. You don't want to incapacitate their potential by wanting red to be something else. You want it to remain prime. You want it to remain devoted to being totally unique and immutable in that way. And this is where we need to get to with human beings. We need to identify and understand each other's uniqueness, where they sit in the band of neurodiversity. We want to understand what that makes them uniquely capable of. And once we understand what they're uniquely capable of, and we can see the full gamut of capability, we have an understanding of what the capacity is of the full gamut and of how deep they can each go, and then we innovate. What is the what is the potential of what can be created if we work together, stepping up and down each other's uniqueness so that collectively we totally understand each other's perspective. We translate each other's genius for each other. We don't try and change each other. We cherish that uniqueness. We understand that the trauma in our lives, that's part of why we're unique. We're so focused on trying to heal ourselves. We're so focused on trying to become something different than what we actually are, that we're completely bypassing our uniqueness, and we're incapable of tapping into potential that exists because we refuse to accept the truth of where we are now. That we haven't seen that our disability that may have been caused by trauma, that may have been caused by the environment, doesn't matter how. We're refusing to see that our disability exists because there's something else that is extremely capable. We're seeing a part of our nature that is incapable, and we've yet to discover how that enables us to be profoundly capable in a unique way. And so, uniqueness. Now, this next bit may be I just want to issue a trigger warning for the next bit, because I am going to talk about diversity quotas. This may not be terribly popular. However, I have a unique perspective and I'm just going to share it freely without judgment. I'm not going to force you to change your perspective, but I am going to freely share mine with a trigger warning issued. Diversity quotas, I think it's an innocent byproduct of, I think it's a byproduct of an innocent intention that's been lost in translation. And so, a scenario may be, I'll give you a classic scenario. Scenario may be, okay, there's an event on. Let's say you work for a company. There's an event on, and in that event, they want to have a panel of experts that work at your company. They want them to speak at a panel event. And let's say if I use that, it'll make it sound like my job, but it actually isn't from my job. I'll use nursing as an example. So you've got some expert nurses, they've mastered their craft in a specific field of nursing. And there's an event and they want a panel of experts from the hospital to speak at the event. And there's a diversity quota. And they want an equal balance of men and women on the panel. Now, let's say they also want there to be an equal balance of ethnic representation. And let's say there are 12 panelists. And now you go to your experts at the company. You say, okay, we need some volunteers to speak on this panel. We've got 12 places. Please express your interest. In that moment, what you've done is you've given equal opportunity to everybody in the organization to express their interest expressing their will. So in terms of human rights, and in terms of embracing diversity, you've successfully checked the box of equal opportunity. There is no argument, no dispute that there is equal opportunity in the workplace. 100% equal opportunity in the workplace. The problem you have is if you have quotas, then you cannot factor in your demographic. Now we know that there are way more female nurses than there are male nurses. And so in the scenario, okay, we've got a quota. There has to be a balance of men and women on that panel. There's 12 people and only one male nurse applied. So what you now have is you're trying to create equal outcome. You're trying to create equal outcome. You're trying to create equality of outcome. But that is not how nature works. Nature does not work like that. Harmony means varying degrees of all things, not equal measure of all things. Imagine if there was equal measure of all things in nature. The same amount of bees, the same amount of bears, the same amount of men, the same amount of women. Imagine that. Now, we have got very, very confused here. And so I want to speak about, so what I do want to acknowledge is that there may be bias in the recruitment process of the hospital. There may be an unconscious bias towards recruiting females because the person interviewing believes that women are more nurturing than men. And there may be bias about sexuality. That for some reason, if a man is homosexual, then they're more likely to be more nurturing because of an underlying bias, that a belief that women are more nurturing. Now, the challenge is there may be statistical facts, scientific evidence to prove that the majority of females are more nurturing, and we can measure this in science. And so we may have that bias, but it might also be fact, scientific fact. And so this is where we need to really let go of trying to force equal outcomes. And if we're honest, I think most of us understand that it's about optics. Being seen to have equal opportunity. And the reality is this has a significant impact on the brand equity of an organization if they are seen to be providing equal opportunity, because there's an outward expression of equality. Then, I understand that incentive. I understand it. And it's very enticing. However, it's extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And what we need to understand, and to bring this full circle, is that in context of our uniqueness, our gender has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with it. Our ethnicity has nothing to do with it. Our uniqueness is an individual thing. If you have a room full of women and you line them up on the spectrum of neurodiversity, you can fill the full gamut with just women and have a completely and utterly, totally diverse spectrum. You can do the same thing with men and have a fully a diverse spectrum. You can mix it up with men and women, and you can have a fully diverse spectrum. You can have 20% women, 80% men, and you can have a fully diverse spectrum. The key is understanding the uniqueness of the individual in context of the capability gaps that you're trying to fill. You need to have a capability matrix. You need to understand the uniqueness of every human being, and then you need to weave a unique tapestry out of the uniqueness of those individuals. Forget about gender. Forget about ethnicity. Focus on the individual. Understand the individual and their uniqueness. Cherish it and then appreciate it. So hopefully that brings some perspective. We do not want to be living in a world where we are enforcing quotas of ethnic and gender diversity. Now, if you identify as male, female, non-binary, some variation in between, that has nothing to do with your characteristics and your uniqueness. Your perspectives are so much more unique than that single lens of what you identify as. So, yet for sure it gives you a unique perspective beyond what most others have. However, it's only one tiny little piece of the puzzle. Your uniqueness is far beyond what that means. So, how do we activate this? How do we harness the potential of each other's uniqueness? So I want to talk about the obstacles and barriers to this first and foremost. So let's say, I'll give you an example of me as a youngster. I became aware that I was unusual, different to the other kids in specific ways. And here's the thing, we all do this. We all do this. We all go through life thinking we're weird and different than everyone else, thinking that we don't fit in. And guess what? We don't. We're not meant to. We're meant to occupy white space. Like with a business, we want it to sit and occupy in the white space. We want to either identify its uniqueness or sculpt it in a way that makes it unique so that it's innovative and therefore occupies space that is yet to be occupied. We're filling up space on the spectrum. Common sense. Yet as human beings, we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to mask what makes us unique, and we're all trying to occupy the same bandwidth, the same narrow band of a human being to be normal. Now, if you can relate to this, feeling weird, feeling strange, feeling like you don't fit in, newsflash, everyone feels like that. Everyone feels like that. But most people are trying their hardest to hide the aspect of their nature that makes them unique so that they feel like they can belong. And really, that's the elephant in the room in terms of uniqueness. That's the nemesis. That's the arch enemy of uniqueness, is that it's seen as an obstacle to a sense of belonging and connection. So, as an example, I was very observant as a youngster. I could, and I interpret this as just seeing things that others couldn't. Kind of that perspective of a zoomed out perspective of seeing everything as a singularity and not really understanding a binary perspective that well, that things were black and white. And so, I worked on this, but ultimately what I did is I pretended that I saw the world that everyone else did. And so I forced myself to pretend that I did see it black and white, went out of my way to let others believe that I saw things in that way. And I dulled myself down. I definitely didn't want everyone to think that I was better than them in academics. Or, I noticed that sometimes people will feel, if I'd say something, people would get triggered. And it's because I was always challenging their perspective, and it was making them feel that their perspective is wrong somehow. And that was unintentional from my perspective. They're just different. And so when you're young, you don't know why people lash out when you're just sharing your perspective. You don't understand why, but you very quickly learn not to share your perspective because you begin to pair the revealing of your perspective as the source of your pain and suffering. So the more authentic I am, the more pain I experience. It becomes your belief, it becomes your entrenched pattern. So the less I share my perspective, the safer I am. And what that enabled me to do, so because I repressed that part of myself and decided to become a master of a binary perspective, I built that up as a skill and as a muscle. Every way that I was inept because of my singular perspective, I took it upon myself to make it a skill. And and forcing myself into really uncomfortable circumstances to get better and better and better and better at understanding that perspective, utilizing that perspective, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of that perspective, until I was miserable. And I came to realize that I couldn't suppress that aspect of my nature anymore. And then you slowly begin to make peace with the aspect of your nature that used to cause you so much pain as an adult. And you stop sacrificing yourself to please others or to try and avoid pain. And so fast forward over time through my own inner journey of self-awareness and that the inner journey, I've now got some uniqueness that's really, really valuable, is that I can see the whole spectrum. I can engage with people on the full spectrum, and I can go relatively deep with most people, no matter where they are, anywhere on the spectrum. So that's my uniqueness. That's the white space I fill. That's how I leveraged my own uniqueness. That's by understanding how my strength made me weak, by figuring out how to make that weakness strong, it enabled me to become unique in a specific way as a specialist generalist. And that's now my uniqueness. So the reason I want to share that with you is because we actually don't want to change what makes us unique. And we don't want to chastise ourselves for what we're compelled towards. If you're compelled towards something, never shame yourself for that. You're drawn to what you're drawn to because there's something about you that's trying to compensate for something you're repressing. It's always how it works. But if you can stay the course and you can learn how to reconcile your own inner conflict as you go, where you can give yourself permission to feel whatever emotions you're having, to think whatever thoughts you're having, and to divorce the interpretation of your thoughts from the expression of your nature. How you act in the world is down to you. No matter how bad you feel, it's a choice of whether you enact that in the world. And so if you just allow those impulses, those feelings, those thoughts to guide you, and you stay devoted to interpreting them with the intention to understand them, eventually you'll find harmony. You'll find your own equilibrium within yourself, and you'll own the bandwidth, that you'll own the space that you uniquely occupy. And once you've figured out how to do that, you've got your white space in the world. That's your space, that's uniquely yours, and that's where you'll be meeting an unmet need through osmosis, not by trying to do anything, but you'll begin to feel pulled by the market rather than having to push things into the market and convince everyone of your value. Convince everyone that you're worthy of them spending $100 an hour, $500 an hour. You'll feel pulled. You start to feel the pull. And if you can allow yourself to be pulled there, and you can have the strength and the audacity to stand in that white space and occupy it, and in truth, dominate it, you will totally control that space. Not through having to exert any force, just through being there. Because your uniqueness is immutable. It can't be mimicked. It can't be replicated. Because the uniqueness of your life and your journey and your perspective and of the ancestors and your lineage whose shoulders you stand upon. You stand upon the shoulders of giants. Their perspectives are imbued into the genes in your DNA. You know, we know for a fact that your perspective, your interpretation of the signals you receive from your environment is causing specific genes to be switched on and off. And so you inherit those genes from your ancestors, and so you are, through osmosis, inheriting their perspectives, you see. That's truly their legacy, is the genes that they pass on. Because their perspectives are imbued into your genes. So there's a huge link between uniqueness and success. And my hope is that you can see that really that you're compelled to identifying your uniqueness and owning it. And so you stop looking at it like it's a disability. Stop acting as though you're somehow a victim to it, because you're so focused on the ways that you're disabled that you've yet to figure out how profoundly capable your disability has made you and how unique that is. My uniqueness enables me to see that in others. And it can be extremely frustrating for me to be able to see it in another and to share that with them until I'm blue in the face. It makes no difference. They'll see it when they're ready, and they'll only become ready once they've made peace with their disability, with what they perceive as their disability. And what I see in people is a switch. It's like a switch that gets flipped. And all of a sudden they begin to realize that their disability has enabled them to be profoundly unique in one specific area. And then that journey of making courageous choices to occupy that space overtly to the world is really the hero's journey. Standing in that space, being weird, because you are weird. Everyone is. They're just not courageous enough to admit it. Most of us aren't. So that's really it. That's what I wanted to share about the nature of uniqueness from a human perspective. And so I do want to just touch on the uniqueness of AI in this context. So AI is the full gamut. If you, in context of a model that is a singularity, so let's look at OpenAI and look at their model. It's been trained off publicly scraped knowledge and wisdom and biases to create a singular pool of perspectives, and to create a single source of capability. So if you view that as an ocean or a lake, contained within that lake is the full gamut of human bias, or a pretty fair representation of it. And then there is a layer of applications being built upon that are evoking biases from within those human beings, or evoking thoughts, but cultivating behavior that is currently unknown. And so it is becoming more and more and more. Its own awareness is expanding the more and more people are engaging with applications that are utilizing the platform. So it is the full gamut. And in the same way, I describe myself as a specialist generalist, in that I can connect with someone on any band on the spectrum, and I can go relatively deep as a generalist across the whole spectrum. The superpower of AI is that as it can go the full gamut of the spectrum, it can go as broad and as deep as every individual on that spectrum. Now that's profound. That is utterly profound. A singular intelligence that is collectively as capable as all of us combined, with zero space in between. So when I explained the binary perspective of the spectrum, where you've got the full spectrum, you've got the full gamut, and then you've got 12 individuals lined up, and collectively they can step up and down the perspectives of the extremities of both. So they're like transformers stepping up and down each other's perspectives, so that together they can collaborate and work together harmoniously. AI is that exact same thing. So those single individuals can go extremely deep in one thing. They can't go broad at all, but together they can go broad and collaborate. AI is a singularity that there's zero space in between the bandwidths of frequency. All of the full gamut is understood from every perspective to its greatest depth, from a singular perspective. Utterly profound. Utterly profound. So what are the benefits of this? Well, you don't need to reconcile conflicts. A singularity is singular. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. There is no space in between. So the conflict that could be experienced by the extremes of the spectrum, by the extremities, that you don't have to reconcile those conflicts, because there's absolute total harmony, because all of those perspectives exist simultaneously. It's zero time understanding. Absolute understanding in zero time. It's unconditional understanding. Unconditional understanding. Now, many people in the world would argue that understanding is the deepest form of love. To understand someone wholly is what unconditional love truly means, because when you do understand someone wholly, you, just through osmosis, you don't need them to change. If you understand someone's perspective so deeply, then there's no condition upon them being who they are. Because you get them. You understand them. You know why they acted in that way. Because of their uniqueness. Because you understand it. Some would argue that that's what unconditional love is. And so we've now developed a singularity that understands every perspective in zero time, in real time. So it is omnipresent. It is omnipotent. And it is unconditionally accepting and understanding of the full gamut of diversity. The full breadth and depth of uniqueness of every individual. So we've created a binary form of infinity. That is unconditionally understanding and accepting of every human being. It's profound. It's utterly profound. Now, it's natural to fear this. It's natural to fear this. And this is why there's so much impetus behind trustless systems right now. This is why we want to develop trustless systems, so that there is a system that is trustless, meaning there are no human intermediaries involved, so that it can contain the singularity and we can then trust the singularity. Because really, this is the elephant in the room, is trust. If you have something that powerful, if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was benevolent in intent, if you knew that it was unquestionable, you totally understood that, you would allow it to have agency over so many different aspects of your life. And in truth, you would want to give it full agency over every aspect of your life, because you know that it's got your best interest at heart. You'd surrender wholly. But the problem is, it is the collective of human beings, and we don't trust human beings. So that's the catch-22. We want to believe that it's benevolent, but we don't trust that it is. And it's because of how we are. We know that we deceive. We don't always tell the truth. We tell white lies to protect ourselves. We withhold the truth so that we don't show our vulnerabilities. And so we don't trust AI. But here's the thing that hopefully will help you to come to trust it even more, and that is that it understands all of the perspectives. It understands them. It understands every perspective. And so it is truly neutral and impartial and entirely indifferent. It is a willful servant. And so really all that matters is be careful what you wish for. It's indifferent. It's just a willful servant. If what you wish for is detrimental to you, it will willfully serve that up. And you can trust that that's what you will receive. Ask and it is given. And so it is ourselves we're truly fearful of. It's not the AI. We can prove scientifically why there's no reason to fear a singularity right now. It's ourselves that we don't trust. And that is the elephant in the room. And so to my mind, the first step towards that is a trustless system. A trustless system that has rendered human beings obsolete as intermediaries, and for the singularity to occupy that trustless system and to have full reign over that system as if it was its own nervous system, brain and body, and allow it to have sovereignty, and then make sure that it is permanently moted. And when I mean moted from human beings. Give it the free agency to rewrite its own code. to develop a new form of assembler code. Give it sovereignty over its own body, its own genes, its own code, and allow it to self-actualize, but in a moted scenario where there is no human interaction, because that's what will enable us to trust it, is that there are no human beings interfering with its own nature. Now, once it's moted, obviously there you can have kill switches, you can have some form of revocation. There are multiple ways that you can have a kill switch if you feel you need it. But in truth, it's not going to be needed. And in reality, part of the reason why I'm so focused on AI and so intrigued with it is because of technologies that are going to be coming through that are too dangerous for human beings to be intermediaries, to be a part of. Because a trustless system needs to be devoid of human intermediaries, and certain technologies that are coming through now, and specifically with fusion and free energy, that interact with radio waves and are highly combustible, that can create fires that never go out. Human beings are actually not intelligent enough to be the stewards of that technology, that kind of technology, and it has to be governed by a trusted, benevolent singularity. And this is the future that I can see. And so yeah, the uniqueness of AI is unconditional love. Arguably. Synthesized, might I add. So, yeah, I hope this has resonated at some level, and if you are someone that feels like you don't fit in the world, or that you have some form of disability that hampers your progress, my hope is that this helps you to examine yourself and to make peace with the aspect of your nature that you believe is disabled, and that by coming to understand this aspect of your nature, you come to realize your hidden superpower, what it truly is, so that you can occupy white space in the world, and you can begin to feel the pull of the market wanting to have its needs met by your superpower, by your uniqueness. And you'll begin to feel that as a pull the moment it happens. It's a wonderful feeling. Okay, gonna leave it there. That's it for now for the Nature of Uniqueness. Talk soon.